Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Less Stress, More Peace and Happiness Summit. I'm super happy that you joined us, and you are going to be in for a treat today because we are going to hear from Melanie Weller, and I think you're going to be amazed when you hear her topic. I'm going to tell you a little about her, and then we'll bring her on screen. So, does it seem to you that in our society, true wisdom lives in the dark? That the best solutions for our collective problems never see the light of day because they're not profitable to the people with power? It can really leave you triggered and enraged and wondering how to create a new system that makes the old one obsolete. People like us are realizing the importance of weaving together science, spirituality, and storytelling in order to create connection, change, and a new consciousness. Our speaker today is here to help. She lectures and teaches on neurotheology, how our belief system lives in our nervous systems. She unites the contemporary science of her 30 years as a healthcare provider specializing in the vagus nerve with ancient science of how we embody the planets, stars, and the enduring stories associated with them. She's on a mission to spread the sacred union in fearless presence. Please give a generous welcome with me to Melanie Weller. Hi, Melanie.
Thank you so much, Janine. This is fantastic.
I'm really happy to have you on. And I always like to kind of give people a little bit of the background. You know, when I was reaching out, searching for speakers to speak on my summit, and I came across you, it was really interesting to me because I had never heard of this topic. And I do have some, like over 30 years in the natural wellness arena. And in my mind, I would be looking for meditation, yoga, those kind of things. And so when I had the conversation with you, I thought it was really fascinating. But further, on top of that, almost everybody I talk to brings up the vagus nerve. So this is really, really interesting to me. I am going to give you the floor and put myself a little bit in the background here. And we're going to put your title up. And take it away. I'd like for, if you don't mind, just start with, your story. I love to start with your story.
Yeah.
Tell me how you ended up doing the work you're doing.
Oh, yeah. Well, the vagus nerve is certainly having a moment in the zeitgeist right now. And 30 years of, in physical therapy and athletic training really gifted me this reputation as the body whisperer and as a vagus nerve expert. And I always loved working with the vagus nerve, from long before it was popular and anybody knew what it was, 20, 25 years ago.
Interesting.
Because it helped when somebody was stuck and they weren't getting better. And I was primarily in an outpatient orthopedic clinic. It just took them to the next level. And I studied with nationally and internationally renowned experts. I collected credentials, like some people collect fine wines. and still there were others I couldn't figure out. There was always somebody that was challenging me, some of my patients. And so I studied with more experts and got more credentials. And then my life fell apart. I had a midlife crisis with a health crisis, a marriage crisis, and a lawsuit crisis, all very, very close together.
Wow.
And none of my academic knowledge was really useful for all of it.
Exactly.
And one day a patient walked into my office who had his suicide plan for that evening. And I knew I had to bring more than all of my academic expertise to the table. And I had really been wrestling with the relationship of my intuition and my knowledge, my intuition and my expertise through all of my crises. And it was very clear to me when he walked in that I had to show up with both my expertise and my intuition.
Wow.
And 90 minutes later, I'll say he was living in a nightmare of a hallucination where everybody's faces were melting. Like he was truly living in a nightmare.
Goodness.
And 90 minutes later, he walked out 90% better.
Wow.
And I walked out with my fearless presence.
Wow.
And we really saved each other that day. And to me, that's the kind of pinnacle moment where I started showing up with my fearless presence and really understanding that when you bring all of yourself to the table, that miracles occur.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I love the phrase that you saved each other. And
Yeah.
it is interesting. I think all of us, have that dark night of the soul or that crisis period, and it does. You have to dig deep and decide to fight for it. You can take the fork in the road. Some people let it break them, and some people, like you said, bring that fearless presence. I love the phrase, and I saw it in your writing. Now I see where it came from, and I love that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was very clear to me that the universe that life was starting to take me in a direction that I had not planned for.
Right.
And so,
right.
and I had enough savvy at the time to go, okay, what's happening here versus like, how can I fix it and try and it was exhausting to stuff myself into the old physical therapy box. Like I knew there was something unfolding, but yeah. And so then, what has truly unfolded is how our bodies literally mimic the zodiac. I stepped away to do some reading, and part of what I did was start studying astrology just to figure out what the heck was going on with my life. It was all because now there was nothing else was making sense of it. And I have a favorite image from one of my anatomy books that it's a compilation of MRI images to give you a 3D picture of what the ventricles of the brain look like. And I had been studying, as I had been doing backed away from my practice in the midst of the crisis, I did some reading and started learning about how mythology was this mode of scientific writing in ancient times. Like, for example, the ancient myth of Isis and Osiris is the story of the Earth's precessional cycle. They just wrote their science differently than we do now.
Oh, wow.
And when I read about that, I had a very physical therapist kind of thought. Physical therapists think very much in terms of midline to the body, and the Earth right now is at a 23.5 degree tilt. And I thought, oh, what's 23.5 degrees from the center of the body? And in all of my anatomy books, and I've had the chance to look at real skulls too, the opening where your vagus nerve exits the base of your skull is 23.5 degrees from where your the center of where your spinal cord exits your skull.
Wow.
And I just, from my biomechanical knowledge, I could rattle off all sorts of 23.5 and 47 degree angles in the body. Like and there's 47 degrees between the pole stars that our Earth orients towards over thousands of years. The anterior cruciate ligament in our knees sits at a 47 degree angle. And if you only think about the number of people that go to the doctor for headaches, dizziness, and knee problems, that is a huge number of people that are potentially out of alignment on this cosmic scale, because their bodies are like, our bodies literally mimic the cosmos. So I had this idea that storytelling was really about, that myths were really science written in a different way.
Right.
And then I had this favorite picture from my anatomy books that was this MRI of the ventricles of the brain, and the ventricles make cerebral spinal fluid. And I pulled it out to show someone, and when I looked at it, they looked just like the ram's horns that represent Aries. And in astrology, Aries rules the head. And so then I was like, well, where's the rest of it? If it's like literally your anatomy. And sure enough, your anatomy mimics the zodiac in the order of the constellations from your head to your feet.
That's insane. And so was that kind of when the light went on for you and it
Oh,
just all fell
absolutely.
into
I was
place?
like, right. And so then I basically created, I did create a form of energy medicine out of it. I started using this as energy medicine, kind of feeling for those relationships in people's bodies. And because I know how to measure it, I was changing people's actual biomechanics and nervous systems in measurable ways using this alignment process, getting people in line with the zodiac. And
That's
it
fascinating.
tells so many amazing, I think it's so fascinating to look at it on a population level, even like, for example, Libra rules the kidneys, and the Libra's symbol is scales. And so your kidneys sit in your low back, very much like a set of scales. And in at least the US and Australia, the populations with the highest levels of social injustice have the highest levels of kidney disease.
Oh, wow.
So we embody the stress of injustice at the level of the kidneys.
That's crazy. So it's huge. This is so
it's
much
huge,
bigger.
right? Well, and that's what, medically we talk about. Stress is understood to cause 75 to 90% of all disease and dysfunction, but we don't talk very deeply about what that stress really is and how to change it. Like you might need to meditate and stuff, but people live in environments and with other people that are really dysregulating to their nervous system. And sometimes, and not always aware of the patterns that you run through your life and the stories that are playing out. And your nervous system fundamentally runs your story. Like whether you're being kidnapped or rescued, the mechanics of it are very similar, but your nervous system is going to hold it very differently.
Wow.
And the same neurotransmitter sequence that we need for change is the same neurotransmitter sequence that a story takes us through. So we are not wired for facts. We are wired for stories. And these stories, we can see ourselves in stories and we can really use that to figure out what is the root of this stress and how can we change our relationship to ourselves and our relationship to the world in order to get past that. And the answer on how to do that is through nervous system regulation. And ancient systems like the Vedas and yoga and qigong and even feng shui are all systems for regulating your nervous system.
Wow. So I love that you said that we're wired for story. Excuse me. And that's probably why the ancients told their science in form of story so that it got remembered and related to and passed on, because people wouldn't remember and pass on the facts, right?
I would put money down that in 1,000 years, nobody's going to remember all the data we've collected, but they will remember our stories.
You're right. That's awesome. So my question was going to be, how does this help somebody, regulate their stress or reduce their stress and create a more peaceful state of mind? But I think that you just addressed that in your last response on some level.
That you can, yeah, for sure. So understanding the story is, or identifying the story at least is, I think, the most helpful place to start. There are mechanical, your vagus nerve gets compressed or can get mechanically impinged upon at particular thresholds within the body. So we know through the science that stress and trauma always affect the breath. And nobody gets stressed or traumatized and walks like a runway model down the street. We all lock up. We give up rotation first. Nobody rotates really well and has really beautiful arm swing when they're stressed or traumatized. They stop rotating. And where we have horizontal structures in our body, like on the transverse plane, that same plane that we rotate on, like our diaphragm, our vocal cords, our pelvic floor, our floors are horizontally oriented in our bodies. And we hold more stress there than we do in other places. And so when you can open up those horizontal thresholds in the body, then all the structures that go vertically through them, including your vagus nerve, but also your arteries and veins and lymphatics and everything, can move much better. And so this is what I've been doing for the last at least 20 years or so, is decompressing the vagus nerve mechanically in people's bodies. And it gives beautiful musculoskeletal results because it uses the same neurotransmitter that your muscles do.
Wow. So it sounds like people can get a pretty immediate response almost.
Absolutely. I mean, that's my drug of choice.
Right?
I absolutely love seeing how fast people can get better and how easy it can be. And my favorite reaction is actually when people, I don't do quite as much one-on-one work anymore, but when somebody gets up off of my treatment table, or we're working on Zoom, and they're looking around like they can't figure out where their pain or where their problem went. And then they get angry because they don't think that healing should have been that easy.
Wow.
I literally, just before we sat down for this, saw my friend's mom, and I had just seen her once before this. She's completely befuddled that this massive amount of pain that she had on her left hip and all the way down her left leg is now about the size of a quarter.
Wow.
And with very simple nervous system regulation techniques, with techniques that are designed to give her the right stimulus to her diaphragm, and and to give the right stimulus to her brain. And our brains are 80% input from our body and only 20% output. So to get good output, we have to have good input, and that outputs can really just be migraines and anxiety and depression, and like your personality is an output of your nervous system.
Oh, wow. That's an interesting thought.
And so to be able to, I would say evolve spiritually, or to hold a bigger space, and you have to have the nervous system regulation to do it. And our brains, literally, like in long-term meditators, our brains actually, or your thalamus, which is at the very center of the brain, becomes very asymmetrical in long-term meditators. And your thalamus is very involved in your perception of reality. And so it's like you can hold two different realities with your spiritual practice, and that but you can't get there. You can't evolve your consciousness. You can't logic yourself out of your anger and out of your trauma, and you can't find the deepest meanings in life without some level of nervous system regulation.
That's really,
and I like to think about it in terms of even karma, because karma is just cause and effect. And if you're that as you have nervous system regulation, that you soften your karma and you soften your relationship with the things that could show up in much more challenging ways, or if you have a big challenge, then you have the bandwidth to really deal with it in a more efficient and meaningful and compassionate manner.
I like that. So you can be prepared. You don't have to wait until you're in crisis.
And right. Then when the crisis comes, it's not such a disaster. And our neurons fire, or they don't. Like that's really, like a neuron fires or it doesn't. There's no in between.
Okay.
And contrast is the language of the nervous system, and that's the language of stories. Our brains are friend versus foe, trust versus distrust, this decision versus that decision, safe versus unsafe.
Right. I was just going to say safe.
Yeah. And when And you would not go see a movie or read a book and rave about it to your friends if it didn't have enough contrast in it. It would be boring. If the beginning, middle, and end of the story was all happy unicorns and rainbows, you wouldn't enjoy it. You certainly wouldn't remember it.
That's true. That's true. That's an interesting analogy.
So your nervous system will not let you live a dull story.
Oh, wow. That's powerful right there.
You might not know how to tell it in the most interesting way, but your nervous system is all about the contrast, and it will not allow you to live a dull story.
Wow.
And we have to learn to enjoy and embrace the contrast, or to nourish our nervous systems with contrast, whether that's purple versus yellow, or, like across the color wheel, or being with people that are different than who we are. And to really, when you love the contrast, you get out of your limbic system, out of your fight and flight, out of your amygdala, and you get up into your anterior cingulate cortex, which is where compassion and connection and tolerance and all of the the beautiful spiritual experiences live. In the neurotheology research, they call your anterior cingulate cortex the heart of your neurological soul. And most people, through their belief systems, are trapped in their amygdala. They're trapped in this, in a fear response, in fear, friend versus foe, and being afraid of being afraid of connection, being afraid of really finding the answer within themselves, and yet still deeply longing for it. We all want connection.
Exactly.
And our deepest...
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm saying our deepest longing is our mortal relationship with our immortal self. The relationship between our mortal and immortal self. And that's the story of the Gemini twins.
Wow. So it sounds like what you just said sounds like it's almost a conscious choice then to, like if my nervous system won't let me have a dull life, which I can attest to that. It's been pretty crazy lately. And you mentioned creating contrast. Instead of trying to control things, you just surrender. And Deepak Chopra says surrendering is where you're in possibility. You surrender, embrace the contrast, knowing that that's going to help you move up the vibrational ladder.
But here's the thing, that you're not going to move up, and you can't embrace the contrast if you have visual deficits or vestibular deficits or sensory deficits, for example. And there are other systems that can have deficits as well, that are not allowing, if your input system cannot retake in the information, you are not going to get a different output.
I see.
You have to try to change the output. For one modern way that we really do that is through cognitive behavioral therapy, for example. You try to think yourself, to change the behavior consciously. But when our behaviors, both the ones that we, often the ones that we love, and especially the ones that limit us, like procrastination and anxiety and depression and, shiny object syndrome, things on the attention deficit scale are protective responses. Even I would go so far to say that even racial bias, like our biases, whatever they are, whether they're, racial or gender or ethnic based or religious based, that they are protective responses. Your back brain is so busy going, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? And evaluating that constantly, that you cannot get up to your anterior cingulate cortex. You can't get to the part of your brain that's going to connect you, because you're too busy worrying about being safe. And this is not something that happens consciously. And if you're not safe, your body's,
Right.
you get to a certain point with not being safe, your body's going to create pain to help make you
Mm.
more safe.
Oh,
Like
well.
it's going to shut down your movement, your
Mhm.
ability to move.
Wow.
It might
Wow.
affect your immune system to where you get sick or have a chronic autoimmune kind of situation.
Kind of just getting your attention.
Absolutely. It could look
Mhm.
like a
Mhm.
mental health diagnosis. So
Mm.
it can show up in many, many ways, but it is always your body's incredible wisdom trying to keep you safe. And you have to
Right.
retrain your body that it is safe. And you can, everybody's nervous system is different. And so what you fundamentally have to know is how to test and retest yourself so that you know what's working for you. Because a
Mm.
lot of interventions will overdose people.
Mhm.
And sometimes they'll underdose. But like if you do something and you feel great and then the next day you feel like a truck ran over you, well, you overdosed your nervous system.
Interesting.
And you can use nervous system regulation in this way when it's dosed appropriately, both to train your nervous system as well as to rescue
Mm.
yourself when you're in a crisis. Like if I work with a lot of people that have stage fright, or that are
Mhm.
trying to improve their presence and on stage. And when you know your high payoff drills, what's going to regulate your nervous system in the moment, then you can do that and get yourself really centered, or you can sandwich that event. You can do those exercises before and after on
Uh,
stage, and then you're really good while you're there.
right, right. So it's learning specific techniques and
It's
then
learning specific techniques and just
right,
understanding your own deficit and what your body
uh-huh,
really responds to.
right.
What works for me might be very different than what works for
Mm.
you, then would be different than works for someone else. And this is where, the research is great, but it doesn't matter if it doesn't work on you. You
Right,
need to
right.
know how your nervous system is going to process it, because we all process things differently. And I co-teach a certification course called Neurosomatic Intelligence, and we teach coaches and healthcare professionals how to do this test retest process, and to really um so that people can get these really dramatic changes and not
Mhm.
always have to go. Some people do need a healthcare professional, but it's an amazing opportunity to front end problems before
Mm.
they really need medical intervention.
Exactly. Exactly.
And we've seen people, just in the last year that we've been teaching this program, that just even amongst the students and their clients, that we've seen
Mhm.
reduce, that suicide ideation's gone away, that emotional flashbacks have resolved, that their restless leg syndrome has been massively reduced or eliminated, that their relationships are better, that their seizures are gone, you
Across the
know,
board.
across,
Yeah.
but and so our well-regulated nervous system can look like a lot of different things. And it's just endlessly delightful to me to see
Yes.
the, the expanse of it. And it's, and yoga has its own set of
Mhm.
sensory exercises, but we live, and they're great. They're very regulating to the nervous system, but we live in a different world than we did 5,000 years ago.
Mhm.
We have a lot of light pollution. We have a lot of electromagnetic noise happening, and
True, right.
we can really bring both the science and
Mhm.
the wisdom traditions together to get an even better response, and get a response that's really meaningful in our modern world, and that it doesn't have to take months or years or
Right.
anything. Like for people that can't meditate or don't have a hard time sitting still, their meditating might not feel safe to their nervous system.
Mm.
And so they might need some techniques before they can even sit down and be able to do that in the first place.
I
And
love how
there's
you're combining the 2, the ancient and the modern.
yeah, well, and ancient systems are all cosmology based. And there's research now that shows that when solar and space weather disrupts the electromagnetic field of the Earth, it is measurable in our vagus nerves.
Oh, wow.
And the extent to which it's measurable depends on the strength of our interpersonal connections.
Oh, my.
And so the more, socially connected we are, the less disrupted we are by it. And, this really sets up the, it's not that hard then to imagine it. Like, so at the other end of the research, they're saying that the universe is a big brain. So it's not that hard to imagine that if our whole solar system and our universe functions like a big brain, that when planets are in different places, that maybe we get different outputs.
Right. Right.
And that these things can affect not only our individual behavior, but our collective behavior. And the narrative medicine is becoming more and more popular in mainstream medical schools. And even if you don't subscribe to the planets and the story, the zodiacal influence of it, and I would say you don't have to believe in the energy, it just is, and you can work with it or not. Like, that's your choice. But the stories that, the enduring stories that go with the planets and the constellations offer incredible questions that you can ask people to find out what's going on in their life, and to think of, and to see, to uncover where they need change. The number of people I've asked, well, are you being the hero in someone else's story at the expense of your own, that have then burst into tears and known exactly what they needed to do to change their life.
Wow.
And, that you can really use it as a much more effective intake for your clients as well, or much more effective journaling, and we really, like, in a way that you can really work down the body, and, and start to see the patterns. And, we know that our bones are made of stars that exploded millions of years ago. Like, we are literally made of stardust, and we have been storing the stars for as long as recorded history has been happening.
Right. What a fascinating way to look at things.
And if we're learning, there's, we learn through story, and there's some evidence that the universe can learn too.
Wow.
And so we are literally, I say you're made of stardust, and your stardust has a story.
That's perfect. I love that.
When you treat somebody's physical body, sometimes their story will change. But when you treat their story, their physical body always changes. Their whole physical world always changes.
Wow. And I love how you're using those stories to ask those questions that helps you. Is that how you
that's foundational. Yeah, absolutely. And it's just it's a window into what stress really is. Those stories all have lots of contrast. They've got lots of stress in them, and we live these stories so literally. And even the ones that are in the movies, I could tell you how the myth of Isis and Osiris has played out in my life. I could tell you how I was named after Melanie in Gone with the Wind. I could tell you how Gone with the Wind has played out in my life, and how it's quite similar to the Isis Osiris story. I have two people I know named Jennifer Jones that were each named after the actress Jennifer Jones in a different movie, and each of those movies has played out in their lives.
Oh my gosh.
Like, we are literally, like, when you know the story you're living, that it's an incredible amount of power. You can enroll people, like, we're enrolling everybody in our cast of characters, and you can, once you understand your story, you have more choice in terms of who you're enrolling and how you're enrolling and what role you're playing in that story.
That's so interesting. So you made me think my middle name is actually Ruth, after Ruth in the Bible. So now I'm thinking about how that might be playing out. That's really fascinating. This is such an interesting topic. You mentioned, I've spent a good bit of time on your website, and I just want to tell everybody, like, there is a ton of great stuff on there, and you can learn a lot just playing around on Melanie's website. So we'll put links, of course, for everybody to find that. But you mentioned transformation. I'd like to know what the transformation is that's taking place, and what it is that people want, do you think?
Oh, I think ultimately at the end of the day, I think what everybody wants is fearless presence to bring to be.
Mm.
They want to be able to be fully expressed wherever they are,
Mm. That's beautiful.
and that you can bring your expertise and your intuition. And when you're
Mm.
fully expressed, it sets up miracles. Even if you can explain it all scientifically, it just sets up the most amazing life events when you fully
Mm.
show up, because then you become the medicine.
Mm.
And in my signature talk, I weave a coffee metaphor through it. And I say that, like, life will always hand you a coffee that you didn't order. Like, I didn't think I ordered my lawsuit latte, but there it was. There I was holding it,
Right.
you know? And so life is going to hand you something
Mm.
that you didn't order. Like, something unexpected will have something dysregulating to your nervous system
Mhm.
is going to happen. But you can always have your fearless presence.
Mhm.
You can
Mhm.
always have your nervous system regulation. And
Mm.
then you become your own guru. When you know how your operating system works
Mhm. That's
and you
really
know
powerful,
your
isn't it?
power, then you become your guru. And this life is your guru moment.
That's beautiful. I love that. And I hate that we're over time because there's so much more to say. I would like to ask you, what do you think is the magic elixir and how would someone use that?
Oh, the magic elixir is definitely it's bringing your expertise and your intuition
Mm.
together
Marrying the
and
2. Mhm.
marrying the two and seeing that they're not,
Mm.
that they're not separate, and that you're uh and it's really like, and that's an expression of a well-regulated nervous system,
Hmm.
that you get
How does
to,
that
like, in creating safety in your body.
right. I was wondering, like, how would someone it seems like you have such a unique, um,
I do, yeah.
expertise, and, like, you've created this whole thing, and I know people are gonna be fascinated and wanna find out more. Could you give us some action steps that people might be able to take? And I will also, again, refer them to your website because I will tell you, I watched some of Melanie's videos and just stepped through some of the practices. And they seem very, very simple, but I could literally feel the difference in my body already just with some of the breath work. And I've used it a couple of times since then where I feel the stress level going this and I do the coffee straw
Yeah, yeah.
with the hum. Like, immediately just I don't know, I can't explain it, but so she does have great stuff on the website, but I was just gonna ask you if you could, give people, our listeners, a little couple action steps that they might be able to do that could just help them
Sure.
regulate the nervous
Yeah.
system themselves.
So always get a baseline test, like see how tight your neck is turning it side to side, or your arms, or
Mhm.
rotate. I'll try and get a little baseline test on yourself before
Okay.
doing anything. And the easiest thing to do is just to inhale into the backside of your heart. And it's not
Mhm.
always that easy, really. But when you breathe in, to expand your ribs towards the chair or the wall or whatever's behind you.
Mm.
We're all very good at breathing on the front side of our diaphragms and the front side of our ribs. We're typically not very good at breathing behind us.
Mm. Yeah, that I'd never even heard that before. That's interesting.
And I usually tie it in with a little story that that includes an Andean proverb that's one of my favorite sayings, that your future is behind you, propelling you forward, and
Oh, I love that.
your past is in front of you, waiting for you to make peace with it and clear your way. So when you
Oh my goodness.
inhale into the back of your ribs, that you're connecting with your future that has your back, and you're feeling the support of the universe.
Mm. That's beautiful. I'm gonna have to write that down.
But yeah, simple things like that, even with your feet on the floor, lifting your big toes
Hmm.
individually can be really, really powerful for your whole nervous system. That it
Wow.
uh, it engages your pelvic floor, and there it helps to work with your vagus nerve because of how that activates it. And it's just really grounding. Like when you're,
Right.
when we're all in our heads, I do a lot when, as over the years, when I've seen people for neck pain, like I've done a lot of foot exercises just to get them out of their head, because it's the furthest,
Oh, wow.
furthest space away to, bring
Yeah,
the attention,
interesting.
ground them, create some safety. But it's all about, at the end of the day, it's all about safety. But when your nervous system is in line with the solar system,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot more space for magic in your life, and for joy, for happiness, for being present.
I'm going to definitely listen to this again and take some notes. It really is fascinating, and I knew it was going to be. And I would like for you to tell everybody, like I said, I wish we didn't have to end it, because I know we could just go on and on.
Oh, yeah, I could go on for a long time. Yeah.
There's just so much, and it's new and fascinating, and it makes so much sense. And you're clearly have a lot of passion around it, and for helping people. So definitely, I know a lot of people are going to follow up with you afterwards, but please tell us what your gift is for listeners.
So my gift is my Zodiac and the Vagus Nerve workbook that goes over the vagus nerve compression points. It goes over all of the anatomy, how our bodies literally mimic the Zodiac. There's pictures throughout, so it's very clear. You can see what's happening. And there are nervous system exercises for each threshold. I think of a lot of dysfunction happens between Aries and Taurus, and between Taurus and Gemini, and between Gemini and Cancer. Like that those thresholds between the signs are like vagus nerve compression points. And so there are exercises woven in through the book, and
I love that. That's very generous.
Oh yeah, no, I'm so happy to share it. And if you're interested in the neurosomatic intelligence training that I mentioned earlier, link to that will be in the workbook as well.
Okay, absolutely. And we'll link you up for sure on the summit speaker pages. So, well, Melanie, thank you so much. This has really been wonderful, and really appreciate your time and your expertise and your willingness to share with people. Because like I said, I think to me it was new, and I feel like probably as well to other people. So
yeah, well,
just
thank you so much.
I really appreciate you.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for sharing your platform with me. I very much appreciate the opportunity to get my message out.
I think it's really going to be great. And you mentioned like connection, the importance of connection. And that's one of the main reasons for doing this summit. I feel like people, especially the last few years, with the forced isolation, I think started it. And then I think people are kind of just stuck in a mindset of disconnect. And
so the cosmic word, and there's research around this now. We have a pandemic of species loneliness.
Oh yeah, perfect. That's perfect. Yeah. It's a perfect phrase. So
yeah.
I know this is going to bring a lot of value to a lot of people. So thank you again. I honor your work, and I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.